Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale Cadillac Gage V100 M706 Armored car. Since the last video update, the model was torn down further from its original format, and I went ahead and started to rebuild and reformat many sections of the model's hull in order to prepare it for the suspension and to boost up the model's accuracy. We'll be going over all of these additions and modifications in this video, so stay tuned because there's going to be a lot of content coming at you. Okay, now the first portion of this build that I'm going to address is repairing some of the structural damage that the hull endured during its shipping. Like I said in the other video, there are some damaged sections of the model's bodywork that need to be addressed before the model can even progress into its next step. And here goes one of the sections right over here. Here you can see where the two panels make contact with each other, and the builder originally did a little bit of body work to blend the two lines together, giving that nice rounded surface which is found on the V100. Now, during the shipping, it must have took an impact somewhere along the lines, and the two seams the glue lines have cracked, and we do have some chips here in the bodywork. Let's go ahead and get this fixed before anything else. Okay, with the model propped up on its sides, let me go ahead and start the repair. Now to repair this, I'm just going to use some super glue. I'm going to inject it into this ever-growing seam that we have here. And then once the glues are in place, I'm going to go ahead and use masking tape just to bridge it, just to hold the two halves together while the glue's set. Once the glues are dry, I'm going to go in here with the red putty and blend this all in where it needs to be. Now the best way to do this on this one, I saw, is to pry the halves open. And then I just dunk the glue where the two seams join up. Okay. Oop, looks like the crack was continuing here on the back. Let that seep in with my finger. Let it go. Now the tension of the plastic is just going to go back to where it needs to be. Okay, and then from here I'm going to start the taping. Now I could already see the comments saying, "Oh no, you're gluing the tape to the side of the vehicle. That's dumb. You know, you're going to have more work." Keep in mind, the only job of the tape is just to hold the sides together. And yes, once the CA dries, you are going to have some areas that the tape made contact with. But since I have to do the body work anyway, I'd rather have the hulls as one solid piece and then just sand away the extra clunk remaining from the glue from the tape than just trying to piece it together otherwise. So, it's not my first rodeo, guys. I've done this all too many times. Okay, there we have it. So now the glues are going to set. Once they do, I remove the tape, throw the putty on, and take it from there. Now while the super glue is drying, it's now time for me to do the teardown, which will basically include pulling and yanking out just about all the surface detailing that was applied to the model's hull. Let's start with the engine hatches. Easy enough. Let's continue. Well, to what I'm pretty sure may be to some people's horror, all of the details that were on the surface have been removed. Now from here, this is time where I get to roll up my sleeves and start the hull modification process. Starting with first, the axles. Like I said in the last video, I'm going to be making and tooling up the entire suspension for the V100. Because of that, these ones here, these axles, they gotta go. In addition to the axles, so do the descending pieces of plastic that are on the chassis, they gotta go too. Let me go ahead and flip it over and you can see it. And here's the hull now, bottom side up. Now, like I said in the last video, when the builder was designing this model, he went ahead and tried to make it as economical as possible. And one way he did that is by going with this type of a suspension setup. Now, this is something that's not uncommon or unheard of with a lot of the homebrew 1/6 scale vehicles that are wheeled that have been produced by various individuals over the years. Now, what he did was, in order to simulate the differential and leaf springs, he went ahead and just incorporated this hump that we see here on the plastic sides, and he did it to all 4 sections. Now, what this does is that this gives you the proper draw where the wheels need to be with the correct differential mounted, but without having to go through actually fabricating the components themselves, which, if you follow that rabbit hole, will lead to more expenditure and more complexity. And keep in mind, the guy was trying to make just a simple, economical model, which is fine for him. For ECA, that's not going to be the case. So these are going to be replaced with the actual detailed differential and suspension parts. So because of that, these guys, yep, their time has come to an end. Now, like I said in the other video, the way these are held on are with some fasteners. He used some nylocks, washers, some spacers, and some brass rods. Overall, he did a decent job with the design of the piece, and for most of the community, this is pretty good. Now, to take it apart further, I'm going to need to take out some tools because he went ahead and used some fasteners to keep everything in place. Let's go ahead and take care of this. Here are the axles now removed. You can see that the designer went ahead and used just a long threaded rod to support everything together, and design-wise it actually wasn't too bad, but they're done for this build. Now, with them out of the way, it's time to amputate these 2 sections over here as well as back here. Alright, now to remove these sections, I'm going to be using the Dremel Multimaster. You notice I taped up these sections here. This is to ensure a nice straight cut, to prevent the blade from yawing either direction. So with these marked, I could just go across here and remove these sections. Well, with the pieces now amputated, it's time to square them off with a razor blade. This is good to deburr any remnants of plastic that are left, and also helps square off the plates. So, go up and down a few times. After a few passes, the piece will be nice and smooth. With the bottom now squared off, the next section to look at are these two sections here of the bottom plate. Now you'll notice that on the model here, the builder went ahead and added an angle to these two sides here. Now, oddly enough, he actually went a little bit more elaborate than what the real V100's lower panel was. The real V100's lower panel was just one flat plate for this section here. So in order to improve the model, I'm going to go ahead and fix this. Now, here you can see with the square exactly how much of an angle the builder put into this piece. Let me bring the camera over so you get a better look. And with the camera off the tripod, here you can see the angle in more clarity. And this is a mirror image on the opposite side. Now, in addition to building up the two layers, or I should say the two sections on the sides, I'm also going to extend the bottom plate here. Now, in case anyone is wondering, on the V100, the rear and front sections are low, or I should say are higher compared to the section here found in the center. So nothing is going to change with the dimensions of the other portions of the build when I address the center section. And here's the center section now going through its rebuild process. What I went ahead and did was I built up sections on the sides and the front here on both sides with strips of styrene, and then to level it off, I filled the sections in with my two-part epoxy. Once the epoxy fully sets, I could then go ahead and sand everything so it's nice and flat and smooth with some sandpaper and some other tools that I have, and then that will basically wrap up this conversion here. From here, this now takes us to the center section of the wheel wells. Now here you can see the areas now being built up. Now to put things in perspective, here I have my 1/35 scale Hobby Boss V100 kit, and you can see how the hull sections are a little bit different compared to the one that was done by the builder. Basically, the builder did the narrow section here in the center, but he went ahead and just had the wheel wells larger than they really needed to be. And on the V100, these areas here are very important because these areas here are where the leaf springs for the suspension need to hook up. So these areas here are going to need to be fabricated. Now currently you see I have the little shelf that's coming across this section over here, which on the model would be this point. What's going to be next is I'm going to fabricate the inner wheel well wall, which will be going here on the sides. Now for the material, I'm using just 1/8-inch thick pieces of lexan plastic, and they're secured to the hull with adhesives. And for extra support, I have here on the bottom sections some ABS plastic or Plastruct angle stock, which is then glued on, and this really helps improve the rigidity and the strength of the piece immensely, as opposed to just gluing it on just flat. Now, in addition to adding the section over here for the inner wheel well, I also need to build up the sides as well. Now, this is something that looks like it threw the original builder for a little bit of a loop, because if you look over here in the hatch, you have to add this little chunk of plastic in this section over here. And this has to do with the shape that he made the wheel well. The builder went ahead and made the wheel well just this inner box shape, which is similar to like what you would see on your car. But on the real V100s, if I show the model over here, you can see that the wheel well itself is butt up against the armor plate and doesn't have that recess that the guy added. Because of that, you don't have this, or I should say you don't need this little extra chunk of plastic over here. Now, on his rendition, it wasn't really a big deal because he did render these models with the hatches in the closed state. But for my model, I am going to be making the hatches functional, and to do this, I am going to redetail this section over here. Now, before I could go ahead and start adding the missing wheel well sections, I do have to remove this little section here of plastic found on the inner wheel well. With this little chunk removed, I could then amputate this little piece, and this will then give me the location to add the remainder of the wheel well structure. To remove this plastic, I'm just going to use the Dremel with the cutting stone, and I'm just going to hack away at it. Now, all this area here is going to be entombed and buried underneath the wheel well itself, so the cut is going to be a little bit on the rougher side, but it's not an area that's going to be visible, so you can excuse a bit of the roughness. Alright, with that now cut away, you can see that the doorway now is free of that obstruction that it had before, and from here I can now progress. Now before I go ahead and add the missing wheel well, I'm probably going to go ahead and add a little strip of styrene or lexan to this little section over here, just to give it some structure, because you can see that the structure was compromised due to the removal of this chunk of plastic. By the way, the same procedure is also done to the opposite side. Now, this only has to be done to the rear section here on this model, because with the way the V100 is designed, you're not going to have the hatch being a problem on the front wheel well. So the front wheel well can be left as is and just worked around. But this guy needed this modification. Now here's the lower hull with a lot of the mods made, and it should look drastically different compared to the way this hull looked before. Let me go ahead and take the camera off the tripod in order to show exactly what went on here. Starting with the middle section, the bodywork has been completed, and that small little angle has now been completely removed. You can see where the bodywork makes contact with the side hull here, that it's a nice seamless transition, and this will be more noticeable once everything is fully painted. Now on the front wheel well, you can see how the extra plastic, or I should say the extra layers of lexan, were built up to give that missing section of hull, and the wheel wells have been filled in like what was stated earlier. Now, this one here is still going through its refinement. Once the epoxy fully sets, I'll be able to refine it further with the glazing putty, like I've done here on the back. Now, you'll notice on the back wheel well, I went ahead and had to subdivide this plate here in halves. This was just for mounting. Because of the geometry of the wheel well, it was very difficult, not impossible, to try to get a whole plate to fit into this section here. So I decided to divide it in half and then just custom fit each section and mount them in place. Once everything was fitted, the bodywork was added, thus deleting the seam work. You can also see how the other sections were built up. And the front's going to be a very similar story once, again, everything fully sets. Now, from there, this brings us to the front and the rear corner panels that we see here. Now, on the original model, I have a little section over here. This piece here was amputated and deleted, and the reason for that was the geometry. On the V100 chassis, there is a small incline on both the front and the rear section of the vehicle, and these were absent on the starter model that I was working on. So it was a simple modification. I just marked the areas that needed to have been altered, and with the Multimaster, I just went ahead and amputated it. With the plate removed, I fastened 2 pieces of angle plastic on the inside here, and then I fabricated a new replacement plate out of lexan to the exact dimensions and just dropped directly into place. And this guy here is going through the remainder of the bodywork, which just involves some seam removal. The guy here in the back will get a similar type of procedure once the front bodywork is all wrapped. Now, while the bodywork fully sets on the wheel wells, I went ahead and flipped the hull over, and I'm going to focus on the next area of the hull that needs to be tweaked just before I can continue with the remainder of the build. And that has to do with the front nose of the vehicle. Now, like I said before, the individual who designed scaled up and built the starter model here did an overall adequate job with the vehicle's geometry and with the overall scale of the vehicle. However, he did make a slight error with the front nose panels that we have here. Now, this is something that can easily be done if anyone has ever scaled up and scratch built a vehicle before. And I could talk from first-hand experience how easily this is done. And with a vehicle like the V100 with all these weird and wonky shapes and angles, it actually magnifies the potential of having errors. And for doing the entire model and only having these pieces here, he actually did he actually did a very decent job with it. Now, in order to fix, or I should say to tweak the vehicle's hull and bring it more up to accuracy specs, I'm just going to go ahead and just replate the front section. Now, the original panels are still going to remain. I'm not going to go ahead and cut or amputate them off. If anything, I'm just going to cut new panels out of polycarbonate lexan and just overlap them on top in the ways that you see it here. Now, because of these weird shapes and angles that are, again, found on this vehicle, I went ahead and fabricated everything at first with cardboard. Now that I have the geometry figured out, the cardboard, which by the way is the same thickness of the polycarbonate that I'm using, that's going to come in handy, I'm going to go ahead and remove all these sections. These will become templates, and then I can go ahead, transfer them to the polycarb, and mount them to this model that we have here. So let's go ahead and get this done. And with the side template removed, here you can see the line that I drew before, and by the front plate here, just how close the builder was with the angle here on the front sections. And here's the front of the vehicle with the new panels now fitted. You can see exactly how much the shape has changed with the addition of these parts. The bow has that duck beak type appearance to it, which is more in line to the V100 as opposed to the shape before, which was more or less, was very close to where it needed to be, but it had more of a Russian BTR type appearance to it rather than the V100. So from here, I could go ahead and start the bodywork, which will flare all of these panels into where they need to be. Which is important because these two plates here went on pretty well. This one here, the fit was, well, could have been a little bit better, but regardless, doesn't make a difference because this is all going to be flared and fused in with the bodywork. And once the bodywork is all sanded away, you can see how the nose now blends in effortlessly with the remainder of the model's panel work. Of course, as the build progresses, details such as weld beads, as well as the remainder of the fittings, will be fitted to this section over here. Probably one of the trickiest areas to flare in was the front, making it at that knife edge that we have here, which is present on the real V100 series. On the sides, I went ahead and rounded off the corners so that it blends in with the remainder of the vehicle shape. But again, this is another feature found on the V100 family. On the topic of the bodywork, along the side sections over here, you can see that the rear areas are now completely repaired. If we can recall, during the first video with the unboxing, these sections were damaged from the shipping, and now that the repairs are made, the pieces are very strong and are seamless with their overall appearance. With the vehicle placed upside down, you can see now the remainder of the bodywork made to the lower hull. Note the wheel wells are now nice and smooth. The added sections have also been thoroughly blended in, and the whole unit looks like it was built that way from the get-go. The front and rear cornered sections have also been flared in, giving the lower hull now its more accurate shape, as well as the two sections over here on the front. As we recall, there were those angle pieces that were built in originally, and these have now been thoroughly squared off. With all of these modifications now out of the way, the next step is to start adding the vehicle suspension. However, this will be discussed further in the next video update. However, I do want to leave you with a quick little sneak peek, and that would consist of these two little bags that I have here. And if that's not enough to water your appetite, perhaps this giant wheel should be able to cue you in on what you're going to be seeing in the next video update. And with that, that wraps up this project update video for this 1/6 scale Cadillac Gage V100 M706 Armored car. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being project update videos like this guy over here, or the other smaller scale model showcase videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in the loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of this particular build that have been posted since project start, as well as the other smaller and larger scale builds that are showcased on this channel. Finally, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks for watching. See you next time.